All right. So my name is Alec Piggott, and this is my Capstone project final presentation. It's called the Weekly Soccer Roundup. So getting started here with my introduction, these are some of my initial thoughts and ideas that kind of got the process started. Sports are continuing to grow in popularity in America, but despite this massive interest in sports, our country has seemingly decided to ignore the sport recognized as the world sport. Soccer is considered the number one sport for a large majority of countries around the world. The most recent World Cup final had 1.5 billion live viewers in comparison to the Super Bowl that only, I say only like this isn't a huge number, but it only had 300 million live viewers in comparison. Uh, of course, there is some attention given by American sports media towards some of the most important storylines taking place in soccer, whether that be your Messi's or your Ronaldo's, but it is nowhere near the coverage of the other top leagues in our country receive, being the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, and NHL. And in spite of this is in spite of soccer passing baseball for the third spot in terms of overall viewership in America. So it doesn't really make sense why it's not getting the coverage if the views are there. My research question to kind of guide and get the process started was, how do I create an experience that gives people an understanding of what's currently happening in soccer and put that information all in one place? So here we have a review of the state of the art. I looked at 3 American soccer websites, the first one being Goal. It was primarily focused on headlines, articles, and videos. There were little to no mentions of player stats or the scores of the games, and the majority of the video content was aggregated from other media platforms. 90 Minutes, once again, primarily focused on headlines and articles. No statistical information found whatsoever, and there were a lot of clickbait headlines. And lastly, Soccer Stats. There was plenty of statistical information for every league around the world, which mine limited it to just the top 5 leagues. But there were no articles or written analysis in any fashion, and no media content outside of scores and player statistics. So to begin the process and kind of get out of my own head and see what other people were thinking outside of just myself, I wanted to conduct a design thinking session. So from this design thinking session, here's some of the feedback I got. There is not enough analysis given on European soccer players from American sports media companies. It is difficult to access statistical data for individual players in a quick fashion. The statistical data they were most interested in were players' goals, assists, and how well they performed as a whole, which would be like their match rating. It is hard to keep track of what teams are doing well and what teams are not. And then there is an increasing longing for predictions or gambling advice as sports betting has now become legal in more and more states across America. So that takes us to our first design. So on the left, you can see some of my initial sketches. I used the app Balsamic to make some of these. I wanted to keep it fairly broad, but just try and include vague information on what I would like to have included in my first prototype. And so I did that on the left, and then on the right, you can kind of see it come more to life with actual information being plugged into those spots, real analysis being written out, and so on. So that's kind of how the design started. And from that initial design, we get into our concept testing results. So for that, some of the feedback I got from the interviews where they felt the name conveys exactly what the website is trying to communicate. They felt the statistics given are relevant as they are expected figures that are used to compare players and teams. The majority liked the idea of the site, including weekly power rankings based on my opinion. They thought the analysis was particularly important because it leads you through the statistics given and provides context to the momentum and the success of the teams. They thought that the homepage was pretty well done. However, they suggested that the statistical graphs should all have the same look. And then most mentioned that they were not a fan of the standalone power rankings page. They liked the idea of power rankings, but they did not feel that it was enough to be on its own page. And that takes us to our mid-fidelity prototype. So based on the changes that were asked from me, as you can see on the home page, I have the statistical information in the top half, in the power rankings in the bottom half, rather than being its own separate page. It's all grouped together. And then as they mentioned previously about the graphs matching, I wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case. So I tried to make sure that they look similar for the next prototype. And then there were also some feedback on the analysis and some of the more information portions of the page. Rather than having all of the analysis, the predictions, and the best bet all on the same page, I went ahead and separated it into two. So the analysis is simply just me providing a recap of what happened that week in my own words and kind of some of the best storylines and what happened in the top 5 leagues. Predictions is me going a little more outlandish, I guess you could say, and maybe a little more bold predictions. Of things that I've seen happen, and then maybe try and predict the future on something that could happen that probably wouldn't usually. But based on the season, maybe it's trending in that direction. So that's what that section's for. And then lastly, in the corner, you can see the best bet. That, like, obviously there was mention that gambling advice and stuff like that was something that people were interested in. So I went ahead and suggested mine as somebody that is an avid fan of the sports and follows pretty well. That bet actually ended up winning, by the way. Not that it matters, but yeah, just trying to help some people out that feel like they're a little less informed than they could be. And then lastly, we get to our discussion section here. The weekly soccer roundup experience gives fans of the top 5 European soccer leagues a platform to engage with the most important details taking place in the leagues. The website was designed to keep the information brief and condensed, making it an easy viewing and reading experience for the user. The website offers statistics, analysis, predictions, and power rankings updated weekly based on what took place in that particular week. The earliest low fidelity prototype was designed after conducting a design thinking session with 4 participants who were also fans of European soccer. The mid-fidelity prototype was heavily informed by the suggestions provided me during my usability test with the participants, and the user interviews were absolutely pivotal in informing the final design of my prototype. So just to kind of conclude and wrap up, throughout the lifespan of this project, I learned many lessons on what it takes to conduct a process using design thinking, usability testing, and user interviews to lead to a finished product. So that's all I got for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. Tong, thank you again for all the help along the way, and I hope that everyone enjoys. Thanks.